Good afternoon. I'm Jess, and I'm grateful to be here with you all today. As you heard, I'm a sibling to two brothers with support needs, and my relationship to care, as a sibling myself, is one of the most important perspectives I bring into this space today. It's what allows me to speak not just about systems of care, but from within them. As you've also learned, I'm a social worker, and my professional training has helped me make sense of what I've lived, looking at families and care through a systems lens. But what I'll be sharing today lives at the intersection of both, lived experience and professional understanding. And at the center of that is relationship, our relationship with ourselves, with each other, and with the systems we move through. Before we get into the heart of my talk, I want to acknowledge something. Some of what I'm going to share might feel uncomfortable, and that's not by accident. It's meant to make us think, to notice assumptions we might carry about siblings, about families, and about care systems. My goal isn't to blame or elicit guilt, it's to show a perspective that's often invisible, what it feels like to be a sibling inside the care system, and how that shapes the roles that we take on, the needs we set aside, and how we learn to move through the world. This invisibility doesn't come from bad intentions. It's a result of systems that don't often fully support families in the first place. I share this from my lived experience and also from my work with other siblings and families, and I'm inviting you to hold that perspective alongside your own. Because the truth is, seeing siblings clearly isn't just about fairness. It's about sustainability. When siblings are unseen or unsupported, it doesn't just affect them, it affects the whole system of care over time. So if anything feels uncomfortable, lean into that feeling. Let it invite curiosity rather than resistance, and let's explore it together. I'll start by sharing that for most of my life, I didn't know any other siblings like me. I didn't have space to talk about what it felt like, and I didn't think of my experience as something that needed support. And I actually brought something that captures this in a way that words almost can't. This is an All About Me project I did when I was about 7 or 8 years old. What stands out to me now isn't just what's there, it's what's missing. Every answer is about other people, about being agreeable, supportive, helpful, and about making sure everyone else is okay. There's almost nothing in there about me, what I liked, what I felt, who I was. And no one told me to do that. That's just how I understood my role. I had already learned, without anyone explicitly saying it, how to become invisible to myself. I just adapted. I internalized. I became the good kid, the one who didn't need much. And that became my foundation. I don't think I had the language for loneliness then, but over time, that pattern of disappearing, of not being seen even by myself, began to take shape as loneliness. Something that deepened as I grew, and that kind of loneliness can take you to some scary places. It can make you feel invisible, even in the middle of your own family. It can make you question your own reality. It can make you believe that your needs are too much or that they don't exist at all. For me, it looked like learning how to disappear in subtle ways, becoming so attuned to everyone else that I lost track of what I felt. Carrying things I didn't have words for, and assuming I was supposed to carry them alone. And I've come to understand that this isn't unique to me. This is something many siblings learn quietly over time. And while that made things easier on the surface, it came at a cost. It shaped how I moved through the world, how I related to others, how I understood care, and how I believed what I was allowed to need. It also shaped my relationship with my siblings, because when you're disconnected from yourself, it's hard to be in genuine relationship with anyone else, even the people you love most. The way care was structured around us often pulled me into a role that was less about relationship and more about responsibility. But something in me always knew that care was meant to be relational, that we were all human, equally deserving, and already whole young people, each with our own needs and experiences growing alongside each other. And there was a tension between that inner knowing and what felt expected of me and expected of us. It wasn't until much later in my life, through both my personal and professional journey, often intersecting, because funny enough, many of us siblings quite predictably end up in the helping profession and service-providing fields, that I found the sibling community and began to understand that my experience could be named and understood. There were spaces where I could share, learn, and grow in ways that I didn't think were possible, and most importantly, that I wasn't alone, that I never was, and that I never have to be. And while that process was and is beautiful, as I now continue to be in community with adult siblings, while also working to foster and facilitate spaces for young siblings to connect both with each other and with siblings of all ages, it also provokes a lot of grief and curiosity around the reality that these spaces have been and are few and far between, often built and sustained by siblings themselves. And yet what they offer is essential, a shift toward understanding care as something relational, interconnected, and shaped by all of us. And in this past year, that understanding deepened in a way I couldn't have anticipated. One of my brothers, who lives with complex care needs, came to live with me, my husband and my sister-in-law, after being in a living environment that wasn't emotionally safe for him. What followed was a year of crisis, uncertainty, and being it in a way I never had been before. That same pattern, the one you see in the childhood project, showed up again. Our situation brought me back into feelings that I recognized. I could observe the ways I was being pulled to disconnect, to isolate, to sacrifice, to believe that my experience didn't exist because there wasn't space for it in the systems around me. But I also used my adult agency to make a different choice. Not something that appeared overnight, but something that had been shaped over years, through my own healing, through community, through learning from lived experience and from disability justice, and through allowing myself to imagine something different. And so, I chose to stay in relationship with myself, to my brother, and to the reality of what we were navigating, even when it was overwhelming, even when there were no clear answers, or when we were being pushed in directions that felt harmful or misaligned. And what I've come to understand through both my life as a sibling and this past year is that siblings are not on the outside of care systems. We are inside them. We are shaped by them, and we shape them in return. And when we are not seen or supported, it doesn't just impact us. It impacts the sustainability of care for the entire family. This truth became real for me when I realized that our home and the care we were providing had become the system holding everything together. And at the same time, I could feel how impossible that actually was. My brother was in a level of distress that I couldn't contain on my own, and yet there wasn't anything else stepping in that felt safe, humane, or aligned with who he was as a person. And that's where the fear and the grief really set in, because the options that existed, the ones that were being reinforced quietly and explicitly, were options that felt like they required him to be reduced, controlled, or put in environments where connection to his people wasn't guaranteed in order to be safe. I remember feeling caught between two things that didn't feel survivable, either abandoning myself to try to hold everything together, or abandoning him to systems that didn't feel like they could truly see him. And underneath all of that was a deeper realization that we live in a world where it's still hard for people to imagine that disabled people, people with complex needs, people with support needs, and the people who love them can actually be well. That realization didn't just stay abstract. It asked something of me. I couldn't just hold him. I had to stay connected to myself too, and to everything we were carrying. The fear, the uncertainty, the pressure, the grief. And I had to keep returning to the understanding that none of it was my fault, even when it felt like it was. The turning point came slowly, but it came, and real support could finally begin to land. And alongside that, I was learning how to be with him, without fixing, without asking him to shrink, and without losing myself. I can't, and no one can, be expected to contain a human in crisis, but we can choose to accompany them, to stay present without abandoning ourselves. And in systems that don't always hold our humanity, that kind of accompaniment becomes a quiet act of care and of resistance. My story is one sibling's story, but it's not just mine. Across families that navigate rare disease, disability, complex medical or mental health needs, the sibling experience often rhymes in ways that are deeply familiar. Siblings are often on the front lines of uncertainty. We grow up navigating crisis cycles, medical ambiguity, and systems that we're inside of, but not always acknowledged within. And a lot of what we carry goes unseen. There's the worry about our sibling, about our parents, about the future. There's early exposure to stigma, to discrimination, to ableism, often before we even have the language to understand what we might be witnessing. There's the pressure to be the good kid, the easy one, the one who doesn't add more to what already feels like too much. And sometimes, without anyone explicitly naming it, siblings begin to take on roles that aren't developmentally ours to hold. We become helpers, translators, emotional regulators, protectors. And at the same time, there can be a deep sense of isolation, not having the information we need, not having space to process what we're feeling, not knowing anyone else who understands what our life actually looks like. And all of that can coexist with something else that's also true. Because siblings are not just impacted, we are shaped. Many of us develop deep empathy, emotional intelligence, adaptability, creativity, and insight. We become attuned to others. We learn how to navigate complexity. We build strong values around care, connection, and responsibility. But what's important to understand is that these qualities don't develop in a vacuum. They develop in response to environments that often require a lot from us, without always supporting us in return. So siblings are often both undersupported and overdeveloped at the same time. And over time, I found myself looking for ways to make sense of that experience, not just personally, but relationally, professionally, systemically. That's what led me toward disability justice. It was one of the first spaces where I felt like my experience and the experiences of the people I loved so dearly could be understood without being reduced. A place where I could connect my lived experience with my social work training and begin to make sense of care and systems in a deeper way. So I want to introduce and bring in the 10 principles of disability justice developed by the Sins Invalid Collective in partnership with disability justice leaders. I'm sharing them here as a form of ancestral wisdom from disabled people and communities who have always been building ways to survive, care for each other, and create more sustainable forms of life in systems that were never designed for them. And yet, we are often separated from disabled elders and communities who hold this knowledge, ways of living, caring, and sustaining that we have so much to learn from and so much to offer back into. These are also efforts that many families are already engaged in, often without the language or the recognition for it. Disability justice, as developed by activists and thinkers like Patty Byrne, Mia Mingus, T.O. Lewis, and the Sins Invalid Collective, help us understand that these experiences don't happen in isolation. They are shaped by systems we're all navigating. Instead of seeing people with complex needs and the people who love them as problems to be managed, it invites us to see each other as whole people in relationship with each other. Some of these core principles include intersectionality, a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw that describes how different aspects of all identity and systems overlap and shape each other, alongside interdependence, which reminds us that none of us are fully self-sufficient and that care, survival, and well-being are always something we build together. Collective access, which shifts us away from individual accommodation and toward creating environments where everyone's needs are considered together from the start. Leadership by the most impacted and the inherent wholeness and dignity of disabled people and all people. At its core, disability justice asks us to stay with the full reality of care, the complexity, the emotions, the messiness, not just the logistics. Thinkers like T.L. Lewis, through their work on anti-ableism, name how often our systems are not built to hold that kind of humanity. And when that happens, the impacts are significant. Systems don't just fail people with complex needs, they also fail the families and siblings who are living inside them. Care becomes harder to sustain, and people's needs go unmet or misunderstood. And families are often left carrying more than they should have to on their own. And this is where siblings come in. Siblings are often living inside these systems in a very particular way, shaped by care, but not always supported within it. So the question becomes, how do we support siblings as part of an interdependent system of care that values each person as whole and centers relationship, not just responsibility? Supporting siblings can take many forms. It can mean intentional one-on-one time with caregivers, not just when there's a problem, but as a consistent relationship. It can mean open conversations about rare disease or support needs as a whole, helping siblings understand not only their brother or sister, but themselves. It can mean noticing when kids are taking on too much responsibility and protecting their ability to simply be children. And it starts with caregivers and trusted adults, the way adults relate to themselves, their own needs, and to disability and care shapes how siblings understand and experience it. And peer support is essential. Space is created not just by systems, but by communities and lived experience where siblings can connect with others who understand what their lives actually feel like. That's where Sibshops come in. Sibshops started in the 1980s in Washington State, created by a sibling himself, Don Meyer, and spread quickly across the country. Sibshops eventually evolved into the Sibling Support Project, now led by Emily Hull, an organization that trains facilitators and supports Sibshops worldwide. The project is part of the Sibling Leadership Network, which focuses on supporting adult siblings and understanding policy that affects people with disabilities, complex medical needs, and their families. Sibshops are peer support spaces, usually for kids and preteens, where siblings can play, connect, and just exist as themselves. They're not therapy, they're playful, yet deeply meaningful, because within that play, siblings are being seen. They create space to ask questions, to share experiences, for kids to feel less alone, and to just be kids, not the good one, not the one holding everything together. When siblings are supported in this way, they are more able to stay connected to themselves, to their families, and to the realities they are navigating. This is where interdependence becomes visible in practice, the many ways we already sustain care, often quietly and invisibly. It invites us to understand care is relational, not transactional, and to stay connected to all of our shared humanity. It also invites something more, the ability for young siblings to see themselves clearly with care and curiosity, especially the patterns, the roles, and ways of being that they may have formed in response to the systems around them, not to correct or to erase them, but to meet them with recognition, compassion, and understanding. In this way, sustaining care becomes about connection and self-recognition to ourselves, to each other, and to what we are learning about how we move through the world. When we support siblings in this way, what becomes possible over time expands. Care is not something we do alone, it has always been something we build together. At the beginning of this talk, I showed you an All About Me project I made as a kid, where almost everything I shared was about other people, about taking care of others, about making sure everyone else was okay, and there was almost nothing about me. I've been thinking about that a lot. I spent many years of my life living that way. And over time, I've been fortunate to experience a shift, one that has allowed me to slowly expand my sense of self, not away from care, but into a fuller relationship with myself within it. So this is something I've been working on now, a different version of that same prompt. And what I notice now is less about specific answers and more about a theme, learning to stay connected to myself while staying connected to others. I choose to use my adult agency not to just hold everything together, but to hold myself too, remembering that I don't have to disappear to be strong, making intentional space for play, and being a little less careful, a little more silly. And I center the part of me that still wants color and freedom. I dye my hair pink, and I remind myself every day I don't have to take myself so seriously to remain thoughtful and present. There's more room now for small moments, for laughter, for noticing what feels simple and alive. And this is what it looks like for me to come back into relationship with myself. I share it because I don't think my experience is unique. I think there are so many siblings, kids, teens, adults, who are still figuring out who they are outside of the roles they've had to play, sometimes quietly, sometimes much later in life. So my invitation is this: get curious about the siblings in your lives, not just what they carry, but who they are, and make space for that as essential, not just secondary. And gently remind ourselves that disability justice also invites us to extend that curiosity inward, not as critique, but as practice of relationship, to notice how we've all been shaped inside these systems and what might become possible when we see ourselves and each other more fully. It reminds us that care is interdependent. We're all part of a web of support. And within that web, there are caregivers, parents, siblings, and others who are all holding and shaping care in different ways, often while being unseen or under-supported. The more we can recognize everyone in that web as whole people, the more sustainable care becomes. Care is not something we do alone. It has always been something we build together. Thank you.